The first wolf washed ashore just before sunrise. Elara almost missed it. She was standing beneath the abandoned lighthouse, staring across the northern sea as the last rain slipped from the cliffs in silver threads. The storm had passed during the night, but the ocean had not become calm. Waves still rolled beneath the black rocks, heavy and dark, breaking with a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep beneath the earth. Then something white moved between the stones. Elara stopped breathing. For a moment, she thought it was part of a broken fishing boat. Then another wave pulled away, and she saw the wolf. It was enormous. Its white fur was soaked nearly gray, its powerful body lying twisted between two rocks. One ear was folded beneath its head. A silver clasp hung broken around its neck. Elara climbed down. She slipped once. Her bare hand struck the rock, tearing the skin across her palm. She barely noticed. When she reached the animal, she placed 2 fingers against its neck. Nothing. No heartbeat. No breath. Only cold. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked toward the sea. Then another body appeared. Then another. Then another. By the time the sun began to rise behind the clouds, 6 white wolves lay scattered along the shore. Elara should have gone back for help. Instead, she stepped into the freezing water. She carried the first wolf out, then returned for the second, then the third. By the time she dragged the 6th beneath the old cedar tree beside the lighthouse, her dress was soaked, her feet were bleeding, and her hands were shaking from cold. She cleaned their faces. She closed their eyes. And she sat beside them. She did not know they belonged to the Alpha King. She did not know the king had spent 3 days searching for them. She did not know that someone had murdered them before throwing their bodies into the sea. And she certainly did not know that before sunset, the most feared man in Valedorn would kneel beside those 6 wolves, look at the quiet Omega who had carried them home, and lie down among the dead. Because the wolves had not drowned. Someone had wanted the Alpha King to find them. Greyhaven was the kind of village maps forgot. It sat at the northernmost edge of Valedorn, pressed between a dark forest and a restless sea, with steep cliffs rising behind its crooked stone houses and an abandoned lighthouse standing alone above the water. In summer, fishermen filled the harbor before sunrise. In winter, the sea turned almost black, and the people of Greyhaven kept their doors barred against the storms. The village had never been rich. Its houses were built from gray stone and rough timber. Roofs leaned beneath years of rain. Nets hung from wooden poles to dry beside the harbor, and gulls screamed whenever fishermen returned with their catch. At the edge of all of it lived Elara. Her cottage stood beside the old lighthouse, far enough from the village that she could hear the sea more clearly than the people who lived below. It was small. 1 room, a narrow bed, a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 1 chair, shelves filled with dried herbs, a cracked blue bowl, and a window that looked directly toward the northern sea. Elara preferred it that way. She had never been good at crowded places. She was an Omega, and in Greyhaven that word carried a weight heavier than it should have. Omegas were expected to be quiet, useful, obedient. They were rarely invited into village meetings. They were not trained as soldiers. They were not given important work unless someone stronger was willing to supervise them. Elara had stopped expecting people to notice her years ago. She had learned that being overlooked could sometimes be a kind of freedom. Nobody questioned where she went when she walked into the forest. Nobody cared when she gathered herbs along the cliffs. Nobody asked why she spent hours repairing broken fishing nets for old fishermen who could barely afford bread. She simply lived, and she helped wherever she could. That morning, before the storm arrived, she had left a small bowl of fish outside her cottage. 3 thin gray cats appeared within minutes. Elara sat on the doorstep while they ate. Slowly, she murmured. The largest cat ignored her. She smiled. You always eat too fast. A gust of wind moved through the grass. The cats lifted their heads. Elara looked toward the forest. Something was different. She could not have explained what. There was no sound. No movement. Only a strange stillness between the trees. Then the first thunder rolled across the mountains. The cats scattered. Elara stood. Rain began falling. Within minutes, the sky had disappeared. She hurried inside and closed the door. The storm lasted all night. Rain hammered the roof. Wind pushed against the shutters. The lighthouse groaned whenever the strongest gusts struck its old stone walls. Elara did not sleep much. She sat beside the fire listening. She had always been able to hear things other people ignored. A frightened animal breathing beneath a bush. A wounded bird moving through wet grass. A fox stepping carefully over fallen branches. It was not magic. Not exactly. It was simply something she had learned. Animals spoke with their bodies. The way they held their ears. The way their paws touched the ground. The rhythm of their breathing. The smell of fear. Elara understood those things. Perhaps because she had spent most of her life being misunderstood herself. Near dawn, the storm finally weakened. Elara opened the door. Cold air rushed inside. The sea was still angry. She pulled her shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. That was when she heard it. A heavy sound. Not thunder. Not a tree breaking. Something striking the rocks below. Elara turned toward the cliff. The sound came again. Her stomach tightened. She grabbed a rope and lantern. Then she began climbing down. The path was dangerous after the storm. Mud covered the stones. Water rushed between cracks. The wind tried to push her sideways. But Elara kept going. When she reached the lower rocks, she lifted the lantern. The flame shook inside its glass. And there it was. The wolf. For several seconds, Elara simply stared. She had seen wolves before. Gray wolves. Brown wolves. Thin winter wolves that sometimes came down from the mountains searching for food. But never one like this. Its body was huge. Its fur was almost completely white. A faint silver line ran from the top of its head down its neck. There was an old scar across its muzzle. Elara crouched beside it. "You're beautiful." The wolf did not move. She touched its neck. Cold. She knew before she checked again. The animal was dead. Elara lowered her head. The sea crashed behind her. She closed the wolf's eyes. Then she noticed something around its neck. A silver clasp. The metal was engraved with a symbol she did not recognize. A crown surrounded by 6 small points. She loosened the broken strap. Before she could examine it, another wave crashed against the rocks. Something struck her ankle. Elara turned. Another wolf lay in the foam. She stared. Then another body appeared. Her face went pale. "No." She rushed toward the water. The tide was already pulling the animal away. Elara grabbed its front leg. The current dragged. She wrapped the rope around a rock and pulled with both hands. The wolf was heavy. Much heavier than she was. The rope burned her palms. She pulled anyway. The water reached her waist. Her teeth began to chatter. Still she pulled. The wolf came free. Elara dragged it across the stones. Then she turned back. 5 more. She could see them now. 6 wolves. All white. All dead. She looked toward the village. Smoke rose from chimneys in the distance. People were waking. Someone would eventually come. But Elara looked at the wolves and imagined them lying here all day. Cold. Exposed. Alone. Her jaw tightened. She wrapped the rope around her waist. Then stepped back into the sea. The second wolf was harder. The third nearly broke her. By the fourth, her hands were bleeding. By the fifth, she could barely feel her feet. The sixth was the largest. Elara stopped beside it. The wolf's head rested beneath the water. For one strange moment, she imagined its eyes opening. They did not. She crouched. "I'm sorry." Her voice broke. Then she lifted its head. She pulled. The sea fought her. The wind screamed. Her knees struck the stones. But she did not let go. Eventually, the sixth wolf came ashore. Elara dragged it beneath the old cedar tree. She sat beside the animals for several minutes, trying to breathe. Her dress clung to her body. Her fingers were blue. Blood ran from both palms. But she looked at the wolves and knew she had done the only thing she could. She began cleaning them. One by one. She wiped sand from their faces, removed seaweed from their fur, closed their mouths, straightened their paws. When she finished, all 6 lay beneath the cedar tree as though they were sleeping together after a long journey. The first sunlight appeared through the clouds. It touched their white fur. For a moment, the scene was almost peaceful. Then footsteps sounded behind her. Elara turned. 3 fishermen stood halfway down the path. The oldest man stared at the wolves.
His face changed.
"Where did you find them?" "At the shore." He moved closer. Then he saw the silver clasp. His mouth fell open. "Those aren't wild wolves." Elara looked at him. "What are they?" The old fisherman swallowed.
"Royal."
The words seemed to make the air colder. Another fisherman whispered something. The third made the sign people in Greyhaven used whenever they spoke of the Alpha King. Elara looked down at the wolves. The old man backed away. "Those belong to King Caelan." Alara's fingers tightened around the wet cloth in her hand. She had heard the king's name many times. Everyone had. Caelan of Valedorn. The Wolf King. The man who had defeated 3 invading armies before he was 30. The ruler whose soldiers never questioned an order. The Alpha whose enemies disappeared into northern prisons and were rarely seen again. Elara looked at the 6 dead wolves. They were alone. The old fisherman stared at her. "You should leave them." She shook her head.
"No."
His eyes widened. "Elara. They're dead." "Exactly." She looked at him. "They don't need to be abandoned too." The fisherman had no answer. By midday, half the village had gathered. Nobody touched the wolves. Some whispered that the king would punish the village. Others said the wolves must have been killed by enemy soldiers. Someone suggested burning the bodies. Elara stepped between them.
"No."
A man laughed. "You think you can order us around?" Elara said nothing. She simply stood there. Her wet hair stuck to her face. Her hands were bleeding, but she did not move. The villagers slowly became quiet. Then horns sounded from the northern road.
1, 2, 3.
The sound rolled across Greyhaven. Everyone turned. Horses appeared on the ridge. Black armor. Royal banners. Dozens of riders. At the center rode a man on a dark gray warhorse. He wore no crown. He did not need one. The entire village knew who he was. Alpha King Caelan had arrived. Elara looked at the 6 wolves. Then at the approaching king. And suddenly she realized that the storm had never been the thing she should have feared. The storm had only brought the evidence to shore. The riders entered the village. Horses stamped against the wet stones. Armor clattered. Villagers moved aside. Caelan dismounted. He was taller than Elara expected. Broad-shouldered. Dark-haired. His face was hard from years of command, but there was something tired beneath his eyes that the paintings in royal halls never showed. He walked toward the cedar tree. Slowly. No one spoke. Elara watched him approach the wolves. The king stopped. His face changed. The first wolf had been named Ash. The second was Riven. The third was Mara. The fourth was Storm. The fifth was Thorn. The largest was Ghost. Caelan had known every one of them. He had raised some from pups. They had slept outside his chamber. They had ridden beside him during winter hunts. Ghost had once saved his life. And now all 6 were dead. Caelan lowered himself beside them. His hand moved toward Ash's head. He touched the fur. His fingers remained there. For several seconds, he did not move. Then he closed his eyes. No one in the village breathed. The king leaned forward until his forehead touched Ash's head. The soldiers looked away. Even they understood that this was not a moment for witnesses. Elara watched silently. She had expected anger. Instead, she saw grief. Deep grief. The kind that made a powerful man suddenly look very human. Caelan remained beside the wolves. Then his eyes lifted. They met Elara's. His gaze moved to her bleeding hands, then to her soaked dress, then back to the bodies. "You carried them?" Elara nodded. Caelan looked at the sea. "All 6. Another nod. His jaw tightened. Before he could say anything else, a man in black armor stepped forward. Lord Varrek, commander of the royal forces. His eyes settled on Elara, then narrowed. "My king," Varrek said. "She should be questioned." Caelan did not look at him.
"Why?"
"Because she found them." So did the sea. Varrek's expression hardened. "She lives alone beside the lighthouse. She could have known where they were." Elara looked at him. She recognized the accusation immediately. She had heard it all her life. Weak people were easy to blame. Quiet people were easy to suspect. Caelan finally looked at Varrek. Question her. Varrek smiled faintly. Elara's stomach tightened. But then Caelan continued. Not as a prisoner. The smile disappeared. Bring the royal healer. The healer arrived shortly afterward. She was an elderly woman named Mera, carrying a leather case filled with herbs, knives, cloth, and glass bottles. She examined each wolf. Her face became more troubled with every body. Finally she stood. My king. Caelan looked at her. They didn't drown. Silence. Elara's heart began beating faster. Mera pointed toward the mouths of the wolves. No seawater. She examined their lungs. No signs of drowning. Caelan's eyes hardened. Then how? Mera hesitated. Poison. The word moved through the crowd like cold wind.
Caelan looked down at Ghost.
Then he saw something near the silver clasp. A dark smear. Black. Sticky. Elara stepped closer. I saw that earlier. Caelan looked at her. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know what it was. He studied her face. She did not look away. Varrek stepped forward. My king, perhaps we should take the bodies to the fortress. Elara immediately shook her head.
No.
Everyone turned. Caelan's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? They shouldn't be moved yet. Why? Elara crouched beside Ghost. She carefully lifted the wolf's paw. Something red was trapped beneath one claw.
Cloth. Crimson.
She pulled it free. Caelan stared. His face became cold. He knew the fabric. It belonged to the royal military cloaks. Elara held it out. Caelan took it. His fingers closed around the torn cloth. For the first time, true anger entered his eyes. Varrek stepped closer. That could have come from anywhere. Caelan looked at him. Could it? Varrek said nothing. The king turned toward his soldiers. Seal the shore. Then he looked at the villagers. No one leaves Greyhaven. Fear spread through the crowd. Elara looked toward the sea. 6 wolves. Poison. Royal cloth. A missing hunting pack. And now a king who had just sealed an entire village. Something terrible had happened. And someone had tried very hard to make sure no one discovered it. That evening, while the village remained under guard, Elara returned to the cedar tree. Caelan was still there. He had removed his armor. He sat beside the wolves in silence. The sun had disappeared. Only the lighthouse lantern moved above them. Elara watched from a distance. She should have gone home. Instead, something caught her attention. A faint black mark on the ground. She crouched. The same oily residue. It continued away from the cedar. Across the wet grass. Toward the cliffs. Elara followed it. One step. Then another. The trail ended at the mouth of an abandoned sea cave. She looked back. The village lights flickered below. The royal soldiers were watching the roads. Nobody was watching her. Elara entered the cave. Inside, the air smelled of salt, stone, and something bitter. She raised her lantern. On the wall was a symbol.
A crown.
Surrounded by 6 wolves. The same symbol carved into the silver clasp. Elara moved closer. Then she heard footsteps behind her.
She turned.
No one. The wind moved through the entrance. She took another step. The stone beneath her foot cracked. A deep rumble shook the cave. Elara looked upward. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then the entrance collapsed. Stone crashed down behind her. The lantern went dark. Elara stood in complete darkness. Far outside, beneath the cedar tree, the Alpha King remained beside his dead wolves. He did not yet know that the quiet Omega who had carried them from the sea had just disappeared. And deep beneath the mountain, something ancient had begun to wake. For several seconds, Elara could hear nothing but her own breathing. Then the cave settled. Small stones continued falling from the ceiling. One struck the ground beside her foot. She stepped backward. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She turned toward the entrance and pushed against the fallen rocks. Nothing moved. She tried again. Still nothing. The passage was completely sealed. Elara swallowed. Stay calm. Her own voice sounded strange in the darkness. She reached for the lantern. The glass was cracked. The oil had spilled. There was no flame. She searched her pockets and found a small flint. 3 strikes. Nothing.
4.
A spark.
5.
A tiny flame appeared. Elara shielded it with both hands. The cave returned in pieces. Wet stone, black sand, old wooden beams, and a narrow passage disappearing deeper beneath the earth. She looked back at the collapsed entrance. There was no way through, so she picked up the lantern and walked forward. The tunnel became narrower. Water dripped from the ceiling. Somewhere in the darkness, water moved beneath the stone. Elara followed the sound. After several minutes, the tunnel opened. Blue light appeared ahead. She stopped. The walls were covered with small crystals. They gave off a faint cold glow. Elara raised her lantern. The blue light stretched into the darkness. This place was old. Much older than Greyhaven. Older than the lighthouse. Perhaps older than the kingdom itself. She moved slowly. Her fingers brushed against the stone. Carvings appeared beneath the dust.
Wolves. Hundreds of them.
Some were running. Some were standing beside humans. Some were surrounding crowned figures. Then she saw one image that made her stop. 6 white wolves stood around a man wearing a crown. Above them was the same symbol she had seen on the silver clasp. Elara whispered, "What are you?" A sound came from deeper inside. She froze. Something moved. She raised the lantern. Nothing. Only shadows. She waited. Then came the sound again. A soft scrape, like claws against stone. Alara's pulse quickened. She backed away. A wolf could not be here. Not in a cave sealed from the sea. Then she saw it. A paw print.
Fresh.
In wet black sand. Elara stared at it. The print was enormous. And it was heading deeper into the cave. She followed. The tunnel opened into a chamber. 6 stone pillars surrounded a circular floor. In the center stood a shallow basin. Inside it was a black liquid. Elara leaned closer. The smell struck her immediately. Bitter herbs.
Ash.
Metal. The same smell she had noticed around the dead wolves. She took a small cloth from her pocket and dipped one corner into the liquid. The cloth turned black. Then she noticed several clay containers stacked behind the basin. Some were broken. Others were empty. Elara examined one. A symbol had been scratched into its side. 6 wolves.
A crown.
She felt cold despite the warmth of the cave. Someone had prepared the poison here. And someone had been here recently. She saw footprints.
Boots. Fresh.
They crossed the chamber and disappeared through another passage. Elara followed them. The passage ended at a stone room. There was a table. On it lay several pieces of parchment. Elara picked up the first. She recognized the royal seal. Her fingers trembled. The seal belonged to Lord Varrek. She read the first line, then stopped. The words made no sense at first. A list of names,
Dates.
shipments, locations. Then she saw the word wolves. And beneath it, a quantity of black mineral. Elara's breathing became shallow.
Varrek was involved.
She turned another page. There was a drawing of the 6 royal wolves. Next to each name was a small mark.
Dead. 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 Dead.
Elara closed her eyes. She could see them beneath the cedar tree.
Ash.
Riven. Mara.
Storm. Thorn. Ghost.
She suddenly heard something behind her. A stone moved. Elara turned. A man stood in the passage. She could not see his face. He wore a dark cloak. Elara stepped backward. "Who are you?" The figure moved. She raised the lantern. The man disappeared. Elara ran. She grabbed the parchments and hurried through the chamber. Her footsteps echoed. Behind her came another sound. Running. Someone was following. She reached the main chamber. The blue crystals seemed brighter now. The footsteps grew louder. Elara ran faster. Then the ceiling shook. Stone cracked. She looked upward. A section of rock broke free.
She jumped.
The stone struck the ground behind her. Dust filled the air. Elara stumbled. Then a voice echoed through the tunnel. "Elara."
She stopped.
She knew that voice.
Caelan.
She turned. The Alpha King appeared through the dust. His sword was drawn. 2 royal guards followed him. Move. Elara ran toward him. Caelan caught her by the shoulders. His eyes moved over her face. Her hair was covered in dust. Blood ran from her forehead. Her hands were trembling. For one brief moment, the king looked frightened.
Not angry.
Not commanding. Frightened. You disappeared. Elara swallowed. I found something. Caelan looked at the parchments in her hand. What? She gave them to him.
He read.
His face hardened. Varrek. Elara nodded. He came here. Caelan looked around the chamber. What is this place? I don't know. She pointed toward the mural. He might. Caelan turned. His expression changed. The king stepped toward the ancient carving. 6 wolves. A crowned man. He traced the symbol with his fingers. My father told me stories about this. Elara looked at him. What stories? Caelan stared at the mural. That the first kings of Valedorn did not conquer the northern wolves. He paused. They made a pact with them. The guards exchanged uneasy looks. Caelan continued. The wolves protected the royal bloodline. In return, the kings protected the old forests. Elara looked at the 6 wolves painted around the crown. And if the wolves die? Caelan did not answer immediately. He searched the ancient inscription beneath the mural. Then his expression changed. The bond breaks. Thunder shook the mountain. The lantern flame trembled. Elara looked at him. What happens when it breaks? Caelan's eyes lifted. The northern passes become unguarded. A silence followed. Then a distant horn sounded. Caelan turned toward the entrance. Another horn answered. Then another. His guards exchanged alarmed looks. King Caelan, one whispered. We need to leave. They ran. Smoke began filling the tunnel. Someone had set fire to the entrance. Caelan grabbed Elara's hand. Stay close. They moved through the passage. The smoke became thicker. Elara coughed. Caelan pulled her beneath his arm. They reached the outer chamber. The guards went first. Then came shouts. Steel struck steel. Caelan drew his sword. Stay behind me. Elara looked toward the opening. Royal soldiers were fighting outside. But not all of them were royal. Black-clad men had attacked the camp. The battle lasted only minutes. When it ended, bodies lay across the wet ground. Caelan's jaw tightened. A surviving soldier approached. Your Majesty. Report. The soldier was bleeding. Commander Varrek ordered the camp abandoned. Caelan stared at him. Varrek. He said the king had to return to the capital immediately. Caelan looked toward the northern mountains. The trap was larger than he had imagined. He turned to Elara. She was looking at the ground. What is it? She pointed. A single wolf track pressed into the wet sand.
Fresh.
Caelan crouched. He touched it. The print was enormous. Elara looked toward the mountains. One survived. Caelan stared into the darkness. 6 wolves had washed ashore. 5 were truly dead. But somewhere beyond the northern forest, one was still alive. And it was leading them toward the Forbidden Mountains. They left before dawn. Caelan took only 4 soldiers. He trusted no one else. The road north climbed through forests where the trees grew so closely together that daylight barely reached the ground. Snow covered the higher branches. Frozen streams crossed their path. Wind moved through the pines with a low, mournful sound. Elara rode a small brown horse. Caelan rode beside her. Neither spoke much. There was too much to understand. 6 dead wolves. A secret cave. Poison. Varrek. An ancient pact. And now 1 surviving wolf. On the 3rd morning, they found another track. Elara dismounted. She crouched beside it. She is injured. Caelan looked at her. How do you know? The back paw. She pointed. The pressure is uneven. Caelan stared at the print. Then at Elara. You see things I don't. She gave a faint smile. Most people don't look closely. They continued. By afternoon, the forest became silent. No birds. No deer. No wind. Caelan raised his hand. Everyone stopped. Elara felt it too. They were being watched. She turned toward the ridge. Two pale eyes appeared between the trees. Then disappeared. They moved again. The eyes returned. A white shape stood on the ridge. Elara stopped breathing. The wolf was enormous. Older than Ghost. Its fur was dirty with blood. One hind leg dragged behind it. Caelan stepped forward. The wolf growled. Elara touched his arm. Don't. Caelan looked at her. She's afraid. The wolf disappeared into the trees. Elara followed. They found an abandoned watchtower before sunset. The wolf was inside. She had collapsed against the wall. Caelan stepped forward. Elara held him back. The wolf growled again. Her ears flattened. Elara slowly lowered herself to the ground. She removed a piece of dried meat from her pack, placed it on the floor, then waited. The wolf watched her. Minutes passed. Finally, the animal crawled forward. It took the meat. Elara did not move. The wolf ate. Then it lowered its head. Elara slowly reached out. Her fingers touched its fur. The wolf did not pull away. She examined the wound. An arrow had grazed the leg, but there was another wound, a deep cut across the side. Someone had tried to kill her. Elara looked at Caelan. This is Sera. Caelan's expression changed. You know her? Ghost used to follow her. He crouched. Sera. The wolf lifted her head. For the first time, her eyes softened. Caelan reached toward her. Sera allowed him to touch her. Then an arrow struck the wooden wall beside Elara's head. Caelan moved instantly. He knocked her down. More arrows flew through the tower windows. The soldiers drew their weapons. Ambush. Caelan pulled Elara behind the stone wall. The battle outside was brief. Too brief. The attackers withdrew before the soldiers could catch them. Caelan looked down. Blood covered his side. Elara stared. You were hit. It's nothing. It is bleeding. He looked at the wound. Then at her. You're shaking. So are you. For the first time, something almost like a smile touched his face. Perhaps. Elara tore cloth from her sleeve. Sit. Caelan raised an eyebrow. I'm the king. Then you can bleed like one. He sat. She cleaned the wound. Her fingers were gentle. Caelan watched her silently. You aren't afraid of me. Elara tied the bandage. I was. What changed? She looked toward Sera. You looked sad beside the wolves. Caelan lowered his eyes. I was. The words were quiet. No crown could protect him from that grief. That night, they sheltered inside the tower. Snow fell outside. Sera slept near the fire. Caelan sat awake. Elara noticed the old scar across his hand. Ghost gave you that? Caelan looked at the scar. He was young. A small smile appeared. He stole meat from the royal kitchen. Elara smiled. What did you do? I ordered the cooks to give him another piece. The smile disappeared. He stayed with me for 12 years. Elara looked at the fire. I understand. Caelan studied her. You understand what? Being attached to something you can't keep. He said nothing. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was shared. Near midnight, Sera rose. She walked toward the door, then looked back. Caelan stood. Elara followed. The wolf led them into the forest. They walked until dawn. At sunrise, the trees opened. A valley appeared. Stone wolves stood along its edges. Hundreds of years old. At the center stood a ruined sanctuary. Elara stepped forward. The carvings on the entrance matched those inside the cave. Caelan touched the stone. The door opened. Inside, they found the truth. Varrek had been using the ancient poison. He had been working with nobles who believed Caelan had become weak. They had killed the wolves deliberately. They wanted to break him. They wanted the kingdom frightened. They wanted the northern fortresses unguarded. And they had taken Princess Lyra hostage. Caelan's hands tightened. When Sera moved toward another carving, Elara translated the old markings. She was taken before the wolves died. Caelan closed his eyes. For a moment, Elara saw the king almost lose control. Then he opened them. We return. Elara touched his arm. Not yet. He looked at her. You and my sister left there?
No.
She pointed toward the inscription. The bond. Caelan read. The ancient words were clear. A king who answered betrayal with hatred would destroy the bond completely. A king who mourned the dead and chose justice could restore it. Caelan looked at the graves marked in stone.
Ash.
Riven.
Mara. Storm. Thorn. Ghost.
His eyes filled. I want Varrek dead. Elara said nothing. Caelan looked toward the mountains. Then he whispered. So did Ghost. A long silence followed. Then he lowered his head.
No.
He looked at Elara. I will not become the thing that killed them. It was the first true victory of the story. But it lasted only seconds. A horn sounded outside. Then another. Caelan stepped toward the doorway. Riders appeared on the ridge. Royal banners flew above them. One of the soldiers smiled. Reinforcements. Elara stared. Something felt wrong. She stepped closer. The banners were upside down. Her face went pale. Those aren't reinforcements. Caelan's hand went to his sword. They found us. The riders charged. The sanctuary exploded into movement. Men shouted. Horses screamed. Arrows struck the ancient stone walls. Caelan's soldiers formed a line across the entrance, while Elara pulled Sera toward the rear passage. The false royal soldiers wore the king's colors. That was what made them dangerous. They looked like friends until they came close enough to kill. Caelan fought at the entrance. Every movement was controlled, precise. But there were too many. One soldier fell. Another replaced him. Elara looked toward the mountain tunnel. We have to go. Caelan turned. For 1 second, their eyes met. Then he nodded. They ran. The tunnel descended beneath the sanctuary. Sera led them. Behind them, the enemy entered. The sound of boots echoed through the stone. Caelan pushed a heavy door closed. Keep moving. They traveled for hours. When they finally emerged, they found a shepherd's village hidden between the mountains. The villagers recognized Caelan, but fear appeared on their faces. One old shepherd lowered his head. We were told you were dead. Caelan stopped. Who told you? Royal messengers. The shepherd looked at Elara. They said the king abandoned the north. Elara understood. Varrek had already begun rewriting the story. The king was dead. The king was weak. The king had abandoned his people. The truth was being buried beneath lies. But not everyone believed them. A former soldier brought them food. A fisherman provided horses. An old woman hid Princess Lyra's location in a piece of cloth marked with the royal seal. Little by little, the resistance grew. Not because Caelan demanded it, because Elara helped people. She treated wounded villagers. She fed children. She repaired torn bandages. She listened. People began trusting the quiet Omega before they trusted the king. That mattered.
Caelan saw it, and he understood something.
A kingdom was not held together by a crown. It was held together by people. They reached the capital 3 days later. The city was surrounded by soldiers. Varrek had taken control. The royal banners flew above the fortress. But Caelan's people had found another entrance. An old tunnel beneath the palace. It connected to the wolf sanctuary. Elara led the way. Sera followed. Princess Lyra was beneath the palace. They found her chained inside an old storage chamber. She was frightened.
Thin. Exhausted.
But alive. Caelan fell to his knees when he saw her. Lyra ran into his arms. For the first time in years, Elara saw the king cry. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just one tear. Then another. He held his sister tightly. We're going home. They escaped into the courtyard. Varrek was waiting. Hundreds of soldiers surrounded them. He stood on the palace steps wearing the crown. Not the royal crown. A temporary one. Enough to show everyone what he intended. He smiled. King Caelan. Caelan stepped forward. Remove that crown. Varrek laughed. You are surrounded. Caelan looked around. Then toward the soldiers. Am I? Silence. Some soldiers lowered their weapons. Varrek's smile faded. Elara stepped forward. She held the poison containers. The royal parchment. the crimson cloth. One by one, the evidence was placed before the nobles. The truth spread through the courtyard. Varrek had forged orders, poisoned the wolves, killed royal soldiers, kidnapped the princess, and planned to break the ancient bond. He denied everything. Then Sera stepped forward. The old wolf stared at him. She growled. Varrek backed away. The wolf knew him. Everyone saw it. The soldiers understood. Varrek's own guards lowered their swords. His power disappeared in seconds. He lunged toward Elara. Caelan moved, but Elara did not scream. She stood still. Varrek's hand stopped inches from her. Caelan's sword was against his throat. For one moment, the entire courtyard waited. Varrek smiled. "Kill me." Caelan's hand tightened. Then he lowered the sword. "No." Varrek stared. "You want me dead?" Caelan looked at him. "I wanted that." He stepped closer. "But my wolves died because someone believed grief could turn me into a monster." He looked toward Sera, then toward Elara. "I won't give them that victory." Varrek was arrested. The crown was removed. The royal banner rose again. But Caelan did not celebrate. That evening, he returned to Greyhaven. The 6 wolves were still beneath the cedar tree. He carried them himself, one by one. He refused the royal crypt. He refused the grand ceremony. He wanted them where they had first been found, where the sea had returned them, where Lyra had carried them home. The sun was setting. Caelan knelt beside Ghost. Elara stood nearby. The king touched the wolf's head. Then he lowered himself onto the grass and lay down beside them. No crown, no armor, no soldiers. Only a grieving man beneath an old cedar tree. Elara sat beside him. The sea whispered beyond the cliffs. And for the first time, Caelan allowed himself to mourn. The kingdom changed slowly after Varrek's fall. There was no single morning when everything became better. There were still damaged villages, empty homes, soldiers who carried wounds they would never forget, families waiting for people who would never return. But the lies were gone, and people could finally begin rebuilding. Caelan spent weeks traveling through the northern villages. He listened. He apologized. He restored lands taken from poor families by corrupt nobles. He opened the royal records. And he changed the laws that had allowed Omegas to be treated as lesser people. Elara did not ask for any of it. That was why he trusted her. She returned to the lighthouse. The old building became a sanctuary. Injured birds came, foxes, wolves, lost travelers, children from the village. The once abandoned place slowly filled with life. Caelan visited often, sometimes with guards, sometimes without them. He never arrived wearing the crown. Months passed. Sera remained near the lighthouse. She became slower with age. Her white fur turned almost silver. But she still watched the sea, every morning. One winter evening, Elara found Caelan sitting beside her. The king held something in his hand. The broken silver clasp. The one Elara had found beneath the first wolf. He placed it on the stone beside him. "I thought you should have it." Elara looked at it. "Why?" "Because you carry them home." She shook her head. "They were yours." Caelan looked toward the sea. "They were ours." Elara's eyes lifted. He looked at her. No crown. No soldiers. Just Caelan, the man beneath the title. Their love did not arrive like thunder. It came quietly, like winter sunlight through a window, like a hand offered without expectation. Like 2 people sitting beside the same fire and discovering that silence could be comfortable. Caelan never ordered Elara to the palace. He never tried to make her a queen simply because he loved her. He asked what she wanted. She wanted the lighthouse, so he helped her rebuild it. She wanted animals to have a safe place. He gave her land. She wanted to remain free. He protected that freedom. And slowly, the people of Greyhaven stopped calling her the quiet Omega. They began calling her the keeper of the lighthouse. Children came to see the wolves. Sera tolerated them.
Barely.
Years passed. One spring morning, Sera disappeared into the forest. She never returned. Elara knew what had happened. She stood beneath the cedar tree and cried. Caelan stood beside her. They buried Sera near the 6 wolves. And that was where the new generation began. White wolves started appearing along the northern coast. Not 6.
Not 1.
Many. They stayed beyond the village. But sometimes at dawn, one would appear beside the lighthouse. Watching. Waiting. Remembering. Years later, children in Greyhaven would gather beneath the old cedar tree and ask Elara the same question. Is it true? She would smile. Which part? That the king lay down beside the wolves. Elara would look toward the sea. The water would shine beneath the morning sun. Yes.
Why?
She would think about the answer. Then she would say, because sometimes a king has to remember that he is a man. The children never understood at first. But they understood the wolves. They understood loyalty. They understood loss. They understood that 6 animals had died because powerful men wanted power. And they understood that one quiet woman had refused to let those animals become forgotten. The old lighthouse stood brighter now. Its stone walls had been repaired. Flowers grew beside the path. A wooden sign hung near the entrance. No animal was turned away. No traveler was refused shelter during a storm. And every year, on the first morning of winter, Greyhaven held a quiet remembrance beneath the cedar tree. No speeches. No music. Only candles. One for Ash. One for Riven. One for Mara. One for Storm. One for Thorn. One for Ghost. And one more for Sera. Caelan always came. Older now. Silver touching his dark hair. Still strong. Still respected. But he no longer needed people to fear him. He had learned something more valuable. How to be loved. On one particular morning, Elara stood alone beside the graves. Mist moved across the sea. The grass was wet. The world was quiet. Then she heard footsteps. She turned. Caelan walked toward her. He carried no sword, no crown, no royal cloak, only a small bundle of wildflowers. He placed them beneath the cedar. Elara smiled. You remembered. I always remember. A wolf appeared on the distant ridge. Then another. Then 3 more. White shapes against the green hillside. Caelan looked at them. Elara watched their ears rise. They were not afraid. The wolves descended slowly. They did not come too close. They simply stood at the edge of the field. Watching. Caelan looked at Elara. They still come. She nodded. They remember. The wind moved through the cedar branches. A single white feather drifted down. Elara caught it. For a moment, she remembered the first morning, the black rocks, the freezing water, the 6 bodies, her bleeding hands, the king's grief, everything that had followed. She had once believed she was insignificant, a quiet omega, a woman living alone beside a forgotten lighthouse, someone the kingdom barely noticed. But she had learned that kindness did not need a throne, courage did not always carry a sword, and strength did not always come from muscle. Sometimes strength was simply refusing to walk away from something helpless. Sometimes love began with grief. Sometimes justice began with one person saying no. And sometimes the smallest person in the kingdom could change the fate of everyone in it. Caelan reached for her hand. Elara took it. They stood together beneath the cedar. Beyond them, the white wolves disappeared into the morning mist. The sea continued to breathe against the cliffs. The lighthouse turned slowly above them. And somewhere in the northern forest, the descendants of the 6 dead guardians moved silently through the trees. The kingdom would remember the betrayal. But it would remember something else too. The morning an Omega carried 6 dead wolves home. The morning a king chose grief instead of vengeance. The morning an ancient bond was restored. And the morning everyone finally learned that kindness could become a power stronger than any crown. Because the wolves had not merely died. They had left behind a kingdom that knew how to love again.